Hi guys, welcome to Brand X Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's really kind of popular, and that is 80s and 90s action movies. Not just the movies, but the guys that were in them back in the day, and how the genre kind of came from what it came from and then just kind of faded away. And when it faded away and how it faded away, let's talk about all that, because I got a lot of thoughts on this. In fact, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking make a list of some of the main sort of key players in the genre, and there were so many I had to just write them all down because I thought there's no way I'm going to be mindful enough to remember all this when I'm on camera. So basically, it's a genre, like I say, it kind of came and went from the 80s and 90s. Those were really when it was at its peak. But up till that point, really, the action genre was the westerns, your classic westerns, I guess, with guys like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. Those are the main two players. And there were others as well, obviously. But it was a genre that kind of died out by the 70s. I think at this stage, like I say, some of the guys that were in these movies were starting to age quite a little bit. And they kind of evolved. So obviously you had guys like Clint Eastwood. I mean, I could do an entire video just about him. But his career evolved from obviously B-movies in the 50s and then through the 60s doing the spaghetti westerns and getting big kind of status there. And then into the 70s doing the Dirty Harry movies and directing his own films. He's a great film director, but he did a lot of those kind of gritty cop films, not just Dirty Harry, but he did a lot of others as well through the 90s, well, the 80s and 90s, mostly the 80s, I think. And films like Tightrope and The Gauntlet and obviously the Dirty Harry movies and The Rookie, all those great ones. So some of these actors evolved and did other things, whereas you had some of the key players in the action genre like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis, I would say as well. They were really what I call the A-list action stars. They didn't evolve so much. They did other things as well, like maybe comedy, but they weren't as big a hit. These were solely action stars, really. I mean, Stallone has got a lot of talent for other things, and he's done a few other films, but really action is where it's at with him, and he did so many of them as well. And he's a good film director as well, don't get me wrong, but he's no Clint Eastwood in terms of variety. It was mostly action. So that's really what we kind of identify those guys. And like I say, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Bruce Willis, he was more of an everyman when he did action movies, but I'd put those three as A-list. Then you've got your B-list stars, like obviously Steven Seagal, kind of went up his own arse a little bit towards the mid-90s, but before that he was very good. His films were very good as well. Jean-Claude Van Damme as well, really great, and Dolph Lundgren. Those were your B-list, so not quite as good as Schwarzenegger. The films weren't as big budget, they weren't as well made or written or even directed, but they were good and they had cult status and they deserved it, and they maybe deserved more as well, to be fair. But there were other guys as well. Like I said, I've written some of these down that I would put as B-list. Guys like Chuck Norris as well, great sort of cult following that he had. Charles Bronson, the actor, who obviously did films. I mean, he was in The Magnificent Seven. What was that, like 1961 or something like that? So he was getting quite old through the 70s and 80s, but he was doing films like Death Wish. The entire series of 5 movies there, which lasted all the way through till 1994. So he was getting on quite a bit. But you've got other guys in the B list as well, like Wesley Snipes. He was pretty good in action movies. Chow Yun-fat as well. He did a lot of movies in Asia, obviously, under John Woo, the film director, who then came to America to kind of move the action genre on in the mid-90s and onwards. But again, these are all B-list, so they're not your Schwarzeneggers, your Stallone, your Bruce Willis. And Red Brown as well, that's another guy, not really one that I followed, but I'm quite aware of. Another sort of cult status action movie star, a bit lower budget. But you've got other actors as well that weren't so much known just for action movies. They could do other things as well, like romantic comedies and so on. And it wasn't ridiculous to see them do that. It'd be ridiculous to see somebody like Stallone do that, to do comedies. I mean, like things like Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. I kind of have a soft spot for that film, but it's not great. And Twins with Arnie. Again, some people like that film. I like Kindergarten Cop, for example, another Schwarzenegger one, which was kind of more of a comedy than an action film. but he brought his action thing to it. Whereas actors that dabbled more in the action genre, that kind of notable for what they did, like Keanu Reeves, for example, doing films like Speed. But he's still around today doing films like John Wick, which really is great. I mean, that is a high standard of action movie today, which it isn't a standard that gets met very well nowadays with action movies. Kurt Russell as well did a lot of action movies, but he was known for other things as well, and he was legitimately good in other things other than just action movies. But when he did do action, he was very good in it. And he could stand alongside somebody like Stallone in films like Tango and Cash, and the two of them could just be action movie stars, and they were great. There was no one was better than the other, really. They kind of were equal, in my opinion, anyway. Nicolas Cage kind of a weird one, because he's a great actor when he's on his A game, but he's not been on his A game much for a long time. I say that having not really watched a lot of his films but in recent times, but I'm aware of them, and if one comes along that I hear is amazing, I will probably watch it. But in terms of the action movies that he did, it was kind of a window of about 5 years, really, between... What was the first one he did that I can remember? I think it was The Rock. The first one that I can think of that I really liked, anyway, that was an action movie. And I've seen him in other things as well that he's been good in, but we're talking about action movies here. So he did The Rock, which was a Jerry Bruckheimer production from memory. And he also did similar films like Con Air and Gone in 60 Seconds, which were Jerry Bruckheimer films. But he also did a couple... Well, no, he did one John Woo film, which was Face Off. I think he did another, at least one more with John Woo, but Face Off was an action movie. And all of these were between about 1996 and 2000. So in that window of time, he was doing pretty good action movies to the point where he was A-list. He was an A-list actor, but unfortunately for this conversation, he wasn't an action star solely. He was good at other things as well. John Travolta as well, obviously. He's done a few pretty shit ones, but he's done some good ones as well. Obviously Face Off again, with Nicolas Cage, and Broken Arrow, which is a really good film. Christian Slater, I think, did some action films as well. What was that one where it rains, where it's like in the middle of a storm, and there's Morgan Freeman? I can't remember the name of that film, but that was an action film. Pretty good. I think I've only seen it once, but Hard Rain, I think it was called. There were other actors as well that were kind of aging as well by this point, guys like Harrison Ford. He did a few action films. I suppose you can call the Jack Ryan movies action films, although he wasn't an action character in that. Eddie Murphy in the 1980s and 90s, from, I would say, 48 Hours. Well, I think that's his first film, I think. And that was a pretty good comedy / action movie, which hasn't really got the recognition it deserves, in my opinion. But obviously did Beverly Hills Cop trilogy and a film called Metro in 97. And I think after that he didn't really do many more action films, if he did any at all. I can't think of any. I would have liked to have seen more of those with him. But unfortunately from about sort of 1983 till about 1997, that was his era. So again, 80s and 90s. But he did other things as well, and he was very good at them. So I don't really class him as an action star in the same sense that I do Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Tom Cruise, obviously, and he's still doing things today, but he did action films. I suppose you could call Mission Impossible 1. The first one is an action film, and obviously all the other ones are as well. But the Jack Reacher movies that he's done in recent years, I really recommend those. If you haven't seen them, they're very good. So those are your kind of 80s and 90s guys. I mean, before that, like I say, you had Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson, who kind of continued through the years. Obviously, so did Clint Eastwood through the 80s and 90s. Steve McQueen started doing action films with films like The Hunter. You can definitely see that kind of out of the 60s and 70s kind of thing right into the 80s. But unfortunately, he died in 1980. And obviously, it would have been interesting to see what he did after that, like where he would have gone, because I kind of think that he would have gone on to have been the sort of the old man action star that Charles Bronson did, and obviously Clint Eastwood did. And it's quite interesting because Liam Neeson nowadays has gone through a bit of a phase, especially after Taken came out in, was it 2009? He's become kind of the old man action star. Some of his films haven't been as great, but some have been pretty good. And Pierce Brosnan, although I haven't seen any of his action movies that he's done in recent years, he's gone on to do quite a few. So has Kevin Costner as well, kind of doing the aging actor, kind of really trying to focus on action movies. And they've been quite popular, some of them. And like I said, I've seen a few that have been quite good. What was that one with Kevin Costner? Is it A Few Days to Kill or something like that? I have it on my shelf somewhere, but that was quite a good film. I quite like that one. I think it was Luke Besson wrote that one. But the problem was with the genre, I don't know if it got fatigue or whatever, and obviously some of the guys that were A-list, like Schwarzenegger and Stallone, kind of started to age a little bit. I think Stallone kind of fell into bit of a trap of becoming an actor for hire rather than really doing his own project and directing, that kind of thing. Obviously, he made a comeback with Rocky Balboa in 2006, which then got him to do the next Rambo film after that, and then The Expendables. He did a few good films as well. I kind of liked Bullet to the Head, and what was the other one? Escape Plan as well. And around about the same time, Schwarzenegger made a comeback because he'd kind of given up being governor of California, and did a few good ones like Sabotage. I like that film. And obviously he was in Escape Plan as well. And what was the other one that he did where the guy's got to cross through the town? The Last Stand, that was a good one. I think it was Arnie's first film in a long time, kind of a comeback for him. So again, they're kind of doing the aging action star thing. Bruce Willis, on the other hand, since we're talking about the A-list actors here, anything with him in recent years has just been dog shit. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the Death Wish remake yet, but again, from what I understand, he phones it in all the way through that. And obviously, the Expendables movie, it kind of brought back a lot of these actors, the A-list actors and the B-list ones like Van Damme, Dolph Lundgren. Seagal wasn't in this for whatever reason, but apparently he's a bit of a dick to work with anyway. And yeah, so who else have we got? I mean, those were really the main guys, but the genre, like I say, it kind of came out of the dying Western genre of the, well, ended kind of in the 70s really, although there was some that came after that, but there weren't many that were great. But I think the action genre of the 80s and 90s kind of died pretty much around about 2000. A lot of the action stars that were kind of incoming at that time were just like rappers and just not very good at the films. He had a lot of them were kind of martial arts as well, which is great, but it's not really the same. So you had guys like Jet Li and Donnie Yen doing films as well, which if you're into that, that's fine. But the martial arts genre isn't quite the same as the action genre, in my opinion. It's kind of like its own thing, even though it's great. But obviously some guys, Jason Statham, for example, really great at what he does. He's been doing it for about 20 years. He kind of carried the torch. Dwayne Johnson, I think, is quite an interesting one because when he started doing movies with the Scorpion King and onwards, he's done some really good stuff. And there's one called Welcome to the Jungle, or if you're in America, I think it's called The Rundown, where at the beginning of the film he walks into a nightclub, and as he's walking in, Schwarzenegger's coming out, and they have an exchange. Well, they don't have much of an exchange. Schwarzenegger just says to him, "Have fun," as he's leaving and Dwayne Johnson's going in. That to me was kind of a pivotal moment really, because that was kind of like Arnie's on his way out and he's passing the baton to Dwayne Johnson basically. So that's kind of what I read out of that scene. I don't know if that was intentional, but there you go. Other actors as well, like Mark Wahlberg, Gerard Butler, have kind of done action films as well, but they're not the action stars like Arnie and Stallone were. I think Statham is, and Dwayne Johnson, who does other things as well. But beyond that, it's kind of difficult to see where the action genre went. I think it just died a death. And obviously 9/11 as well happened in 2001. And I think to me that really killed it, because people just didn't want to see buildings blow up, at least for a few years anyway. They didn't want to see cars getting blown up and people getting killed and splattered and stuff like that, because we'd seen it for real and it wasn't nice basically. And I think that kind of people got sensitive to it, or at least Hollywood did anyway, the filmmakers did. And I think that really, well, I remember when the Bourne Identity was being made during the time when 9/11 happened, and I even remember them saying that they had this entire ending of the film planned with this big action sequence, and they just basically threw it out because of 9/11 and said, look, I think the world has changed now. They don't need to be seeing this. We need to kind of change our approach with the finale of the film. It kind of ends a bit more quietly than it was supposed to have done. And it's a great film, great ending as well, but obviously I think that to me just kind of says it all, really. So I'll leave it there. I could ramble on for ages, and I probably will in a future video. Like I say, I'm planning on getting somebody else in to talk about this, maybe do a 3-part series, because I feel like I've barely scratched the surface and I've covered like 15 minutes here. So I'll pretty much leave it there. What do you think? Have I missed anything? I'm evidently I have missed a lot of things, but what have I missed? What do you think? Is there anything else that I could throw in the next video, the next series of videos that I do? Because something that I've got a lot to say on, and probably a lot to dig up as well. So I'll leave there for now anyway, and say thank you very much for watching.